My name is Carla Hesse. I am the Executive Dean of the College of Letters and Science at UC Berkeley and a professor of history.
What do you see as the main issue on college campuses with free speech?
Well, I think the whole question of free speech has come back into the forefront because students across a wide range of spectrums feel that their voices aren't being sufficiently heard, both not just on college campuses, but in our society as a whole. Of course, that's been swept into a much broader public conversation about who is included and excluded in our society today. I think that students were at the forefront of this issue in the 1960s. They were the one that made free speech a cause that we should rededicate ourselves to, and I think that we're in a process of seeing them reinvent that for their own generation. That's a good thing. Anything we can do to help them to do that, I think, is the duty of administrators and professors.
Is it different being on a college campus where such a breakthrough happened in the 1960s? Did you see yourself having the same opinions if maybe you were a staff member at another institution?
Well, I think the thing about Berkeley is most importantly that it's a public institution, and I think public institutions do have a different and special relationship to the issue. We have a constitutional obligation to defend freedom of speech. Of course, Berkeley was the founding, the campus in which the free speech movement was founded, and students first managed to achieve the recognition of their right to have political conversations and to organize and freely and to discuss whatever issues were on the front of their mind. So Berkeley will always be seen as a beacon, and therefore can easily become what it did in the last 12 months, a political football for a much broader national conversation about whose voice can be heard and in what context and what setting.
And lastly, reflecting on the panel today and all the different opinions that we heard, did it change your opinion of who adjudicates, or is it the same as before?
I don't think my views changed. I learned things by hearing how these issues play out in much smaller liberal arts colleges rather than in larger university settings. I think liberal arts colleges in some sense have a bigger challenge than major public universities. Of course, we've been much in the limelight, although not so much as in the limelight as in recent times as small liberal arts colleges, where this issue of homogeneity and political correctness, I think, is much more acute. Berkeley is, in fact, a quite diverse campus. It's diverse politically, it's diverse culturally, it's diverse in terms of the ethno-racial composition. And so I think we don't have the homogeneity problem. What we do have a problem with is making it a place that is safe enough for people to speak across their differences and to get outside of their comfort zones. That we share, but in some senses we're advantaged because we have neighbors next door who are not the same and look different than us and think differently than us, and so it's just getting getting us to a place where people feel safe enough to leave their own neighborhood.
Thank you very much.
I think university leaders have to be committed to talking in their community about the importance of public discourse and to demonstrate through their actions that they're willing to have controversial, difficult speakers with ideas, with substantive ideas, and that they can have a culture where people learn how to respond to that with their disapproval. That the leaders themselves have to model, is the word I'm looking for, how to disagree, how to engage in how to disagree, and then how to move on.
Berkeley, if you could suggest a solution to the social media problem, what would it be? Is it censorship? Is it people that don't have a filter?
Social media, it's too complex for a solution. What I will say, though, is that censorship is a last resort, an absolute last resort. Now, as we're discovering more and more of these websites or social media vehicles for spreading hate and violence, I mean, that's crossing the line, of course. We're talking about threats to public safety or individual safety. But censorship is the last resort. I do think that we as a culture need to grow up a little bit when it comes to social media and learn that every idea that I have is not important to be shared with an anonymous population. Now, if I want to share my ideas with people I know, I should be willing to do that and able to do that all I want. But the protection of anonymity in social media, I think, is an incredible danger. Social media does a lot of great things, but we have to be mindful if it really does some incredible damage as well. And restraint is the best way I can think of heading towards an answer in the first place.
Common sense, as you described in the presentation.
Exactly.
And lastly, can you please explain the difference between public versus private for those who aren't familiar?
As far as universities are concerned, so thinking of the Constitution of the United States, all of these laws, the Constitution applies to things in the public realm. And so a state university, that is with funding written into existence by law, by the state law, funding historically had come through these university legislatures, not so much anymore, but still there's the legacies of that. Those universities are absolutely bound by all the terms of the Constitution. Private institutions, like the one where I teach, aren't. We're a private institution, we can do what we want. However, because we do believe in the greater good, and that greater good is signaled by these federal laws, we by choice abide by the same kind of ethos that's driving these public universities to act in certain ways. I mentioned ethos, though, because we are not obliged, like, say, the University of California, Berkeley, is obliged legally to welcome all these people onto their campus. They can't stop it, except in the case of public threats to public safety, which becomes really tricky to adjudicate sometimes. At Northwestern, we can stop whoever we want. We choose not to, though, because we do believe in the importance of the public discourse and see ourselves as contributors to that public discourse.
Has there been a situation that kind of brought some light humor to the situation? Maybe something that made free speech seem more of a joyous occasion than something that has to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis?
I'm sure there is, but boy, I can't think of it right now. We're in a difficult moment nationally when it comes to who gets to speak, what they're saying, what's believable, and all of these kinds of issues. So I don't find much humor in it. Now, I consume social media. I laugh at the silly things that I see. So there's that. Silliness is out there. It's fine. But that's different than what you're talking about. And these are tough issues and a tough time.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.